So let's begin. Firstly, like I mentioned, I would not instruct you on how to configure a Discord bot. So for this example, we'll be using a random piece of code that just starts a HTTP server on localhost port 8080, which will print hello world. This is just a simple example, but the principle is the same for Discord bot. The reason I'm using this particular language, JavaScript, is that JavaScript and thereby Node.js is a very popular framework for building Discord bots. So many of the principles taught here will be very applicable when running your very own Discord bot. So just to confirm that the code works, I've pulled up my terminal here and we can navigate to the code by going to, in my case, the folder code, and we simply run node and choose the file labeled hello.js. You'll see it says server running at HTTP localhost 8080, so let's go there and see what we can expect to find. As expected, when we navigate to localhost 8080, we'll see hello world printed. So the code is working as expected, and we can that means the code is working as expected, and we can resume the course by creating a server and setting up to run remotely. In order to run a Discord bot, In order to run a Discord bot around the clock, we'll need to first acquire a server in the cloud. There are free options available, particularly if you're a student. Programs such as Google Cloud Hosting and I believe Amazon will provide you with a free VPS, or what's called a virtual private server, for up to a year for as long as you're a student. In my case though, I'll need to find another alternative. There are plenty of options to choose from. Some popular ones are either the aforementioned, or Azure, or DigitalOcean, or Linode. In general, there are plenty of servers out there, so just choose one that you like. In my case, that's going to be DigitalOcean, so let's navigate to cloud.digitalocean.com. The cloud subdomain is just so that I'm already logged in. And as you can see here, I have a completely blank account with nothing on it. So let's follow this guide here and get started with a droplet. Now, a droplet is just DigitalOcean's way of saying a virtual private server. Most providers will have various different ways of saying the same thing, but basically what you need here is a server that runs in the cloud around the clock without you interfering, just providing some basic setup for this server. So that's what we're going to do here. Let's choose Ubuntu because that's the most common one. Let's go with a very basic setup and see, just going with the cheapest one we can find. For this example, since we won't be having actual users, it's not necessary to choose any sort of optimized server in any capacity. If you are expecting users, you might need to upgrade to a different package than the one I'm choosing here. Secondly, we get to choose where in the world we'd like it hosted. For me, I'd love it hosted in Amsterdam, so that's what I'm gonna go with. Thirdly, we'll need a way to connect to the server, and you can use either password or SSH key. It's very common if you're familiar with SSH keys to do it that way, but for now we'll just stick with a password. SSH keys are more secure than a password, so I'll always recommend doing it that way, but if you're not very tech savvy, passwords can be usable. I am just going to do something rather complicated here. Have my password tool generate one. I'm just going to write that down on my off screen. Lastly, we'll need to choose a host name. Since we won't actually be purchasing a domain and pointing anything to this server, this is not going to matter. If you do have a domain, it might be easier for you to recognize what you're doing with this droplet by giving it an appropriate name. Lastly, we won't be needing backups since this is just a demo project. You can choose to do so with your provider if you so prefer. Now, that's it. We just gotta wait for the server to get spun up and we'll be able to connect to it. See you in a bit. Now that our server has been fully configured, we'll be able to connect to it and fully configure our around-the-clock available Discord bot. The first thing you'll need and notice is that we have this number here. This is the IP address we'll need to connect to the server, so let's grab that. From here, you can either, some providers utilize a way for you to connect to the server using tools of their own. I will always recommend using your very own terminal for security reasons. So let's hop over there. In my console, we'll have to write SSH space root @ and then insert the IP address. This will do one of two things. Either you'll first see this error or a warning, I should say, with what's called an ECDSA key fingerprint. You can choose to accept or deny this. The outcome should be a yes, as we know we're connecting to the correct server, but ultimately it shouldn't matter. Since we are not configured to connect via SSH, it will almost always result in a permission denied regardless of what we choose here. However, just entering the same command again will prompt the server to ask for a password because it knows we're not authenticated to connect using SSH. So let's go ahead and do that. What's going on here? So what we'll need to do is we'll type SSH root @ and then make sure we grab the IP address, which will prompt the password that I have written down in my second window, copying and pasting that in here, and we have access to the server. Now, once we've been logged into the service, there are two things that are very important we need to do. First of all, we need to make sure that Node is installed so that we can run our application. And secondly, we need to get the code from our local machine and to this cloud server. So to check whether Node is installed or not, we can type either just Node or commonly node-v. This returns a command Node not found but can be installed with. So not only does this tell us that it hasn't been installed, but how to do it. You can either copy this or you can just type it out. This will prompt you to continue accepting that the following packages will be installed. This looks correct, and therefore we just press Y. Once Node has been installed, we can again attempt to check whether the installation is correct by typing node-v. This time we get a v10.19, which means Node has been successfully installed. From here, we need to make sure. Now, the second important thing we need to do is move our files from the local machine to the cloud server. For this project, we only have one simple file, which means we can just copy and paste it. For more advanced projects that has anything beyond one file, I recommend getting into Git and learning the JIT protocol in order to move files securely from your local machine to the cloud server. Proceeding with just copying and pasting, what we can do is first of all make a folder for our project, and let's call it discord-bot. This can be done with the command mkdir. After that, we can cd into this new folder, and from here we can create a new file, and we'll simply name it hello.jas again, similar to what we did on the local machine. From here, we can use one of the built-in editors on the cloud machine. Most cloud servers come pre-shipped with these editors. There's Nano, there's Vim, and in some cases Emacs as well. Vim is a bit of a power tool, one I prefer to use myself, but can take a bit of learning getting into. So for your case, you might prefer to use either Nano or Emacs, but in this case, we'll be using Vim. From here, we can simply copy all the code from our local machine from the open file, tap back over in the terminal, and do a -v. Using Vim, we'll need to press escape once, then make a colon, and if you notice the bottom of the terminal, we start typing. This is because Vim supports commands and takes special keywords for starting commands out, such as the colon. From here, we press WQ, which stands for write quit, and hit enter. We have now saved the file, which we can confirm by typing cat hello.js, and we now have exactly the same contents of the hello.js file on the cloud server as we did on our local machine. From here, in theory, we could do the exact same thing that we did on our local development machine and just try to run the code. Because we know that we have both Node and the code available to us. So let's try that. So again, we type Node, followed by a space, and then the file name, hello.js. This gives the exact same result that the server is running at localhost at 8080, which appears to mean that everything is running. However, if we go to localhost port 8080, you'll notice that nothing is happening. This is because localhost is what's called an alias, and it's referring to the production server in this case, as we are running the code from the cloud server, and thus not referring to our local development machine. So what we can do is we can go ahead and grab the IP for the server, go into the browser and append a 8080 to that. This still doesn't work, however, and is the result of the web server not being correctly configured. I won't be going over the configuration of the web server in this video, but for learning purposes, I'll link a tutorial down below so you can go ahead and configure it on your own. Now, assuming you've configured Nginx and the web server on your cloud server, what we're gonna do is we're still gonna make one small adjustment. Remember that our application is currently listening at port 8080, which is not a common web port. We'll need to configure what's called an Nginx reverse proxy that can listen for port 8080 and forward it to port 80, which is the common web port, so that we'll have results show up in the browser. We can confirm that we have configured Nginx correctly by visiting the IP address of our server, and as you can see here, if I hit refresh, we'll be served the welcome to Nginx landing page. This means that Nginx is correctly configured, and then we can make some adjustments to actually serve our desired content here. So what we'll need is the following script. And what I'll do is I'll simply copy paste it from here. And then we'll need to go to our app, type sudo vim etc nginx sites available default. In this file, we'll need to scroll down a bit and locate the section that says location dash and then curly braces. And this needs to be the part that's already within a section that says server and then curly brackets. So what we're gonna do is in Vim, we're gonna hit what's called, I think indentation, actually never mind. What we're gonna do in Vim is we're gonna put our cursor here and just hit X until we can delete everything here, because we don't need any of this. We'll do the same for the following lines, and you can just hold in X if you prefer. Totally up to you. And that last curly brace. Now we can go ahead, press I, we can dash out here and hit Control V. We'll need to make sure this is properly indented using tabs. Whoops. Oh, that was weird. press escape once, and again we hit :WQ. From here, we'll need to reload our nginx config, which can be done by typing sudo systemctl restart nginx. Now, if we go to our IP address again, and this time we are not appending port 8080, we just simply go to the IP address, you'll see that it correctly prints hello world. After restarting nginx, we'll need to launch our server the same way we did locally by typing node hello.js, provided you're still in the Discord bot folder. Now, if we go and visit our IP address of the server and not appending 8080, you'll see that it now correctly prints hello world. And this is because the nginx reverse proxy forwards the port that our application is listening to port 80 of the server, and thereby accessing the IP address means that we're forwarding the request to our local application. Now, we could just leave it like this, and we'll already have a Discord bot that can run 24/7. However, given that this isn't very production stable, we'll do one more thing to make sure that our application can restart itself, and will boot on server restarts just in case something happens to the server, so that we don't have to go and do this manually. So for that, we'll first need to shut down the running server by hitting Control-C. Doing that, just as a test, you can hit refresh in your browser window and you will see it throws an error. This is because there's nothing running on port 8080, and therefore nginx can't serve anything to us as the user. Now, to get a little bit more production stable, we'll use a tool called PM2. This is simply what's called a node package, and we'll install it by typing sudo npm install -g, stands for global, which means we can use it in any context, and then PM2. Huh, that's weird. All right, so if you see the same results and if you get sudo npm command not found, well, that means we have the same issue as we did before installing node. So in this case, we'll also need to install npm separately. This can be done by typing apt install npm and hitting Y. Once the installation is complete, we can proceed with the same idea we did for testing node and typing npm -v just to confirm the version. As that seems to be clear, we can simply hit up a few times until we find the command we were trying to run in the past, sudo npm install gpm2, and hit enter. This time you will see it starts spinning and starts installing. Once the installation is complete and we have PM2 available, we can simply do PM2 start hello.js. As you can see, this spawned what's called a PM2 daemon, which runs the hello file and calls it hello. It strips the file type, and we should now be able to access our app in the browser. From here on out, PM2 will take care of auto reboots and keep the environment much more stable. Additionally, you can configure it to automatically start with the server, so if you ever need to reboot your VPS or cloud server, it will automatically launch your application again.